when I joined, we had 1,200 people in Discord and maybe 2,000 followers on Twitter. On the Jumper side, what I wanted to do is kind of get out of our own bubble. It was very easy to kickstart a B2C account and just like have DeFi promoted. We took a different route before Jumper actually launched. We just did this like super weird quests. We did a lot of these nuts jokes. I don't know why, they always make me cackle, and it was really successful. You kind of pick up followers through that as well. But like initially, it was really trying to conceive a strategy that brings us new people that are not DeFi related people.
Today we've got a very special guest, Marko, aka Zordan from Jumper. He's one of the people spearheading marketing efforts on the Jumper side. Jumper, as you might know or might not know, is a bridge and a swap, but also currently sort of expanding their vision into something much more than just a regular bridging experience. So I wanted to have Marko come on and talk a little bit about his experience in Web3 marketing, because Jumper has been doing some very successful marketing campaigns as far as I've seen as an outsider. Marko, let's start by you introducing yourself a little bit of your background, how you started in Web3 and what you are doing within Jumper.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So my journey started at Pico Top 2017 during the week of Pico Top. And I think one of the best things that happened was I kind of got annoyed with myself because I've done research, but research was bad because the portfolio was going down. And so I just kind of stuck around reading, writing, kind of helping others understand like different projects. We did a lot of like protocol reviews. And then when COVID happened, I had a lot of free time on my hand, and I just started actually getting into the communities and like kind of participating more actively, if you will, from a user-centric perspective. And then like within a few months, it became really a nuisance of having to like go to a job, go to an office. And I just basically slowly made the transition into Web3. I started working for a marketing agency first. That marketing agency ran the whole marketing for DeFi. And I was basically hired as a key account for DeFi, or DeFi was my kind of key account. And about 4 or 5 months in, we made a transition. I got an offer from DeFi to move like within the company and start building the marketing team in-house. And drop the marketing agency, basically.
Like I said to you before we started recording, I got a list of questions here, but I really think we're going to sort of meander from topic to topic. But let's start with sort of a general overview of how you guys at the Jumper approach marketing. What would you say your guys' philosophy is when it comes to like how you market Jumper as a product to the community?
I think the philosophy is community first. You don't have a product or a company if you don't have a community. And so that is a deep rabbit hole of being a user yourself, so you can understand the community, listening to the community, and having like really active ways of community participating with you in ideating, testing, feedbacking, and stuff like that. And so this is kind of what we're building on as a preface. Maybe to enter into like how Jumper marketing turned out to be, I think we need to mention DeFi first, because my marketing team basically that developed Jumper within or incubated Jumper within DeFi ran marketing for DeFi as well. And so DeFi is this super trustworthy business lingo, like no shit posting, no these nuts jokes, just very like to the point. You're talking to the devs, you're talking to the CEOs, founders, researchers, etc. And so when the idea to like move into the B2C market came, and we were kind of discussing like what's the go-to-market strategy for it. One of the things that within our team we really liked the idea of having a vent place in a way. So think of everything we wanted to do with DeFi, but we were kind of barred and couldn't. We used Jumper for that. And so the initial Jumper strategy was basically, okay, Pepes. I'm a personal fan. I have a folder of like 3,500 Pepes. I can probably run a whole conversation with it. And then just like very degen oriented. Like if you know the Greg profile, for example, he was catching a lot of people with these nut jokes and stuff like that. So the idea was, okay, let's make something that people are going to relate to and something that's going to be funny to them, like in the sea of like technical discussions. And maybe we can get into that later. Like one of the grave mistakes I think a lot of protocols are doing from the marketing perspective is just like me, look at my product, look at my feature, look at my whatever, without the other side of it, which is more like public good. Like what am I as a protocol teaching the industry or giving to the industry or like educating or whatever And so Jumper just was this kind of blow off vent, if you will, so we can literally, quote unquote, and pardon my French, fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
And it worked pretty well. And this is kind of what we built on top since.
So I think, first of all, just to talk about some numbers, and you can probably do it better than me, but Twitter-wise, you guys that are at around 180,000 followers. You have just had a pretty successful campaign called, I think, was it
Superfest. Superfest,
right? Where you sort of had an incentivization mechanism for your users to go and explore. I think it was like 20 different protocols. So we can get into the numbers, but exactly what you already mentioned is, to me, what's unusual is that Jumper is almost like an intern account, right? So when you go to Jumper, you see a bunch of memes daily. Like on a daily basis, I would say maybe 70% is shit posting, and then 30% are updates and, you know, relevant content to somebody that wants to learn about Jumper as a protocol, which is weird because Jumper, at the end of the day, it is a bridge, at least at its core. It is a financial product, at least at its core. So how do you think about, you know, having sort of this completely degen narrative built around the financial protocol? Do you think that this is something that is replicable for other DeFi protocols and other protocols in different verticals? Or do you think you kind of caught lightning in a bottle and that most of the protocols should actually be, like you said, sort of button up and talking mostly in extremely professional terms?
I think it greatly differs who are you talking to. If you are talking to the end user of this industry, then no, business lingo is not going to get you anywhere. I think there's a little partial thing of like lightning in a bottle that happened to Jumper, which is a prerequisite for someone to have a social media strategy like that, and that is trust. And we were lucky enough to incubate Jumper within LeFi and kind of inherited the trust of LeFi, so we can start building on top of that. So kind of a prerequisite for someone else to try to replicate would be, okay, first you need to establish trust, right? Like to be able to kind of screw around with other protocols and be edgy and stuff like that, people first have to like be like, okay, this is, you know, a protocol is solving a problem. They know what they're doing. It's a solid team behind it, and then you can enter this like really, you know, fun area. If I honestly believe, like as a protocol, if you start with that, it's not going to happen. Like you don't have the flywheel effect. You don't have this kind of prerequisites, foundations that you need to be able to develop a strategy like that.
So, okay, let's talk about some operational things. First of all, how many people actually do work on Jumper's marketing?
So specifically like hired for that, me running it, and then we have another social media person, DJ, who we hired for that. But in total, there's 5 of us. So we have Matisse, who's not really like outspoken on Twitter, but super degen. He's probably one of the like top airdrop hunters in the industry, and so he always comes forth with a lot of ideas. He's a member of a lot of communities. He was super early to Bear NFT, so like he's super deep in the weeds. We have Jordan, our community lead, communities under marketing. So it like he would fit under the umbrella as well. So all of the like TikTok style content, videos and stuff like that, that's him. You know, that he just like comes up with new ideas and throws it into the chat. And then we have our June, who's our head of research. And so his main job is, you know, figuring out what this industry is and what the protocols are and who we need to integrate. And he's basically responsible for all of the public good content that we wrote on the LeFi side, the bridge risk framework we developed with consensus. But his brain is a shit poster. Like for me, for example, I need to actively think about something. For him, it's a natural. It's like a 2-second response to something to create a copy or edit a copy and stuff like that. So we kind of looked at that and we decided, okay, so DJ is in charge of social media. Like he's posting it, right? Like he's scheduling it. He has a plan when goes out, what goes out when, type of thing. But the joke we made on Twitter was that we're all part of a kind of an intern validator set. And what that means is we have a chat between the 5 of us. And so every idea that you have for a post, irrelevant if it's like a dry post, or just like an announcement article for a campaign or a shit post, it first gets sent there. And then you kind of propose a copy and you need one more signature to publish, basically. And so anybody can come in and say, hey, maybe like this lingo, this word, outdated meme, whatever it is, you can kind of also stop it. But all 5 people have kind of the same power, if you will. So you need 2 out of 5 multi-sig passes to be able to publish a post. Yeah.
Very cool. And that sort of brings me to, because really the idea of this entire conversation is to think about how founders can be in Web3 can be better at marketing overall. And specifically, let's start with just people that are jumpstarting a protocol. Maybe they even haven't raised yet, or they just raised a pre-seed. They've got some money in the bank. They're thinking about different core roles that they need to fill, right? Where do you think marketing comes in? When do you think a CMO role should be on the table for them? Do you think founder-led marketing is the way to go for people that are just starting in bootstrapping? Sort of how do you see an average new founder in crypto starting to build out a marketing team and a marketing campaign?
Yeah. So I think like the C levels positions for startups and new companies are definitely a no-go. Like you want hungry execution, not strategic planning for like 6 months or 1 year down the line, because who knows if your protocol is going to be here 1 year from now. Marketing starts from day one, and I think one of the I was thinking about this as well recently. I can like single out two profiles that people can actually go and check. And this is Zero X Jim from Catalyst and David Phelps from Joker Race. So both of them were like looking actively for like a growth marketer and a CMO-ish type role and someone that can like lead a marketing. And in this kind of phase of looking, they were like, well, I'll just tweet. I'll just like post about the product, and they did it in different ways. So like David is really like he knows shit. He's like more Gwart type profile where he's able to like quote unquote shit on the industry while implementing Joker Race as a solution a lot of times. And so he's doing this like subtle marketing the whole time, basically, where I don't think at this point he even needs a growth marketer. And Jim kind of did same goal, different ways of doing it. So they, as founders, decided, like I need to talk about my product. And so this is the best possible type of marketing, because for a founder, you're the one that knows how you got the idea, what problem you're solving, who your ideal or target customers are, and you need to be outspoken about it. Like there's no better marketing than having a founder that actually has reach and has already built a level of trust, if you will, from like Keon from Monad as well, like super active. And I think like you cannot replace that. Even with a large team, with a CMO, this is a foundation that needs to exist pretty much. And there's no better way to create it than like initially get yourself, when you're small, when the repercussions of doing something bad are not as grave than they are when you're like a 200K or 500K follower account.
For sure. And I second David as a great follow. Obviously, Jokers is one of the companies that Daedalus is also invested in. He's the guy that did an on-chain wedding at the ETHCC. So
it was our event, yes.
There you go. So obviously, super like marketing wired brain there. For founders, let's say they started shit posting or just generally posting about their product. How do you get from a 0 to 1,000? So this sort of first wave of new users, or like just jump starting a community, how did Jumper get to that? Obviously, you had DeFi as this big brother that helped sort of seed that initial wave of attention. But from Jumper's own sort of perspective, how did you start and actually go from no community to, oh, look, there's people in Discord just sharing memes or whatever?
Yeah, there's actually an interesting aspect, because we did both. We did inherit the community of DeFi, and I can get into later how we built the community on the DeFi side, because when I joined, we had, I think, like 1,200 people in Discord and maybe 2,000 followers on Twitter. So on the Jumper side, what I wanted to do is kind of get out of our own bubble. It was very easy to like kickstart a B2C account and just like have DeFi promoted to their community, and you kind of fill the followers, if you will, and fill the community. But we took a different route. So for about, I think from August, September of 2022 until March 2023, this is the time before Jumper actually launched. And this is the time where we started kind of building the social media presence for it. And the way we did it was we just basically did this like super weird quests. So it was a profile that had like a question mark as a PFP, bio, everything was done in ciphers. And I've used like different types of ciphers for bio, different type for name, different type for like different things, just to make it more like, what is this? Like, I have no idea what this is. And then on top of that, I've ran quests that were like, it was a poem with like Arbitrum word missing, and you had to figure out that it was Arbitrum to get on the whitelist, but no one knew what the whitelist was about. So it was just this, bear in mind, like this was still like bull market-ish vibe. So like everybody wanted to participate in everything. So I'm guessing the strategy would differ today, with the expectations of the users being much, much higher for any actions that they're doing. So we climbed to the first 13,000 followers in the first like 4 months that way. So it was very like organic in a way, outside of the LeFi bubble and outside of the bubble of like us as employees and our network. And then about month and a half before the intended launch date for March 1st, this is the first time that we're actually supported it from a LeFi perspective, like tweeted about it from a LeFi perspective, and we went from like 13 to 30, 35. And then the rest is kind of just shit posting, basically. It was partially campaigns, partially shit posting. And I think like a lot of people started sharing these tweets, especially early on. We were like really edgy. As we grew, we learned how to temper it a bit, or tone it down, if you will. But in the beginning, it was really, really funny. Like we did a lot of these nuts jokes. And I always refer to that because I don't know why, they always make me cackle like really, really hard. And it was really successful. Like these got a lot of engagement. They got shared a lot, and like you kind of pick up followers through that as well. But like initially it was really trying to conceive a strategy that brings us new people that are not LeFi related people. And then on the LeFi side, the community in early days, it was basically beta testers. So we wanted active community participation. And the beauty of our protocol was, hey, we integrate a lot of liquidity sources, we integrate a lot of bridges, we open up new chains. So there's a lot of things to test. And so what we did was we kind of created this, you fight in general to get a beta tester role. So you can help us test the protocol, you get access to features first, and you can kind of help us shape the product, because it's not just like the integrations that we're having, it's also the features that we're building that need to be tested out. And that kind of led to this like more structured approach, how the community on LeFi side is built. So you join Discord, you're in general, but then you have these things where like you need to participate actively to get them, be it a beta tester, or you want to be a support mod that pays, for example, or you want to be a mod for a different language that pays as well. But in order for you to get there, you actually have to prove yourself to the team first and already be an active participant. Once you get there, then you had the NFT gated part, which was more for like OGs, people that are like and helping and using the protocol and everything. And they got these like NFTs that commemorate their level of involvement. And just fun note, this was done about like 2.5, 3 years ago. There's 100-ish in total that were issued. I think the floor price at the moment is like 0.6 ETH, and only 4 or 5 were sold. So majority of these like OGs that we managed to build back then are still within the community, still super active, and still advocating for now Jumper before LeFi to Twitter and their own communities.
And have you sort of pasted that model for Jumper's Discord as well, in terms of like different tiers and NFT gated access to?
We have not. We've kind of just focused on the social media part, especially as the attention dwindled when the prices went down. The activity in Discord also went down. But with these new campaigns coming up, our community lead has a lot of like more kind of restructure what we've done back then and start applying it today, because we do want at least the most active part of the community to feel that they are the protocol in a way, right? We want to give them more power. We want to give them even decision power, test out governance, and like play with these things in a way to see who will stick with us for the long term in a way.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think that brings me to when you said you're mostly now sort of focused on social media. It brings me to another, I guess, operational point. Let's talk about both the channels that you guys are using when it comes to marketing. So are you guys strictly on Twitter? How active are you in terms of like trying to, I don't know, bootstrap or grow a Discord community? Are you on Farcaster? Are you doing YouTube? What are you doing in terms of just general formats and channels? Let's talk about that first, and then we can talk about acquisition channels afterwards.
For sure. So actually, up until a few months ago, it was strictly Twitter. Now, Instagram and TikTok are, for example, on like this back burner thinking. And I think one of the problems is, and this is maybe an advice to a lot of new companies, like hire young, like hire really young, like, 18, 19, unexperienced, but like hungry and terminally online. Because a lot of us, like TikTok, Instagram, a lot of these social medias are literally like I'm not using it. I don't understand it. Like I don't even know how to approach it properly. So you need like either a company or someone that really knows how to do it well. And because the things we're doing were really successful, we just like pressed the gas on that and kind of ignored, if you will, the other channels. But we're at a point now where we need to like it's also like from the beginning that I explained how I wanted to venture out of our own bubble. I think we're at the same point now at this size that we need to kind of venture out again and learn how to handle the new publications. And so one of the ways that we're now slowly entering to that is we're going to do a lot more video content. So instead of the spaces, we're going to do like restream type things where like this is a conversation like this that we can have cutouts then and like these shorts and stuff like that that work a lot better on video platforms like TikTok or Instagram for that matter.
But
Uh,
for founders that are just starting out, you would probably suggest Twitter to
Twitter.
be like their 90% of efforts, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because like before you even get to the, like the users that understand and use the products and they're going to find you on Instagram and TikTok, there's higher likelihood they would find you on Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, the way I see it, at least, I could be wrong, is you're venturing into like more a normie territory, right? So either you have to be a protocol that's like really oriented to them, that needs to be like understanding what your protocol does. And so like the barrier of understanding and explaining what you actually do is much more, it's higher, right? Every now and then I go check like what crypto related content is on these publications. And it's usually, like one or other version of BitBoys. This token and this analysis and like by this and by that, and there's like financial advice type things. And there's not really a lot of like tech oriented conversations. And as a founder, like that should be your focus. Like David, for example, it's not tech oriented, but it's problem oriented, right? Like our industry has XYZ problems. This is not working well. Whatever you can solve with joke race. But for someone to understand the value proposition, they need to understand why this is a problem. And for an audience on like TikTok, like how are you going to, like what video are you going to prepare to have them to understand the problem? And this is one of the things that we looked into as well, is like, okay, who is our typical user that we want to onboard? Well, it's someone that is active on more chains. For someone to be active on more chains, you actually have to like know why you're going to be active on more chains. You need to understand that like that more chains exist, that it's not just Ethereum or Solana or whatever you've heard as a kind of placeholder for a chain. And so the kind of onboarding or the funnel that we can create is just too complicated, right? Like there's foundational knowledge that someone has to have in order to understand what our value proposition is. And so this is something that is changing now with the products that we're building now that are more like campaign related and kind of this user acquisition funnel building through incentivizations, because that's an easy value proposition. Oh, I'm using a product, I do X and I get Y for a reward. That's easy to understand. And now with this, we can venture out and be more simple in how we onboard. But when we talk about just the core protocol, cross-chain swaps, okay, what are chains? Why can't I just send from one chain to another? Like there's so many like questions that pop up. I usually always advise people like just try to explain what a bridge is, like not even aggregated, just a bridge to like your friend that bought ETH and holds it on Binance, right? Like they're gonna be like, run me through it again for like 10 times until they get half of the notion of what the problem is being solved.
You already got into there a little bit into defining user personas, which I do want to get back to. But before that, talking a little bit about acquisition channels, because I think also for founders, this can be a little bit daunting. Obviously, there's just like organic social media marketing, Twitter, Discord, whatever, after you've already sort of built a community and, some of your posts go viral, you get some users, blah, blah, blah. But there's also a lot of just Web3 native acquisition channels and sort of marketing tools that I think you guys are also sort of leveraging to a point, like questing platforms. You guys are obviously doing now partnerships with a lot of different protocols, which I think there's a lot of synergies between you and other chains that I don't really think other bridges are exploring as much. So just generally, if you can walk me through a little bit of what are the top 3, let's say, or top 5 acquisition channels that you've used back then and are using now. Have they changed after you sort of have grown as much as you have?
I mean, I don't think like the channels themselves have not changed as much. It's just like how you use that channel. So for example, 2 years ago, when I thought of ads in Web3, I was like, nah, we're not doing that. Forget it. Like I'm not even looking into it. I don't care. The place has too much connotation of scams and like ads are scam, period. Going forward today, where it can be an effective strategy. So for example, you have addressable. Addressable helps you connect wallets with social profiles, and then you can basically export these social profiles into an audience on Twitter. So you can basically, based on someone's on-chain behavior, you can target these users directly, which is a really, really good method if you kind of manage to crack the code of like what would make them come to you. Then questing platforms you mentioned. I think these are the largest ones, and this is probably an area that changed the most in the past like 2.5, 3 years. So early on, we were actually between the first 5 protocols on Galaxy when it was called Project Galaxy, like way back when. And back then, it was super simple. It was like, follow a profile, join the Discord, and get this like on-chain achievement token. A little bit of a caveat. So Popes did that before, but I think with POAP, they kind of screwed up by trying to be this exclusive, hard to get, even from a protocol perspective, like hard to organize something with POAPs. If you have like more than 1,000 people, you like, go through all kinds of hoops and like record our community calls and show them, hey, we had 2,500 people, 1,000 is not enough, and stuff like that. And so like Galaxy bridged that gap, but at a time where no one gave anything. And so people like things, it's a vanity thing, you can send a wallet and stuff like that. And so it worked. But as projects started doing that, the value of what they're getting started being degraded, looping all the way up until like end of last year, where airdrops, 5, 10, 15K per wallet, people started getting like ludicrous amounts of money. And so the expectations of the users changed. But that means also is that what reward and how you incentivize change as well. So on-chain achievement that worked really well 2 years ago, for example, or a role in Discord, or like any type of this like vanity type metric, if you will, or vanity reward, does not work anymore, right? Like people, they want to click, they want to get dollars, click dollars, and like they want a lot of dollars. And so like these things change in how you operate or how you use these platforms, but the channel doesn't change as much. And I think like even with the saturation, the campaigning or using these questing tools, if you will, is still one of your best ways to do it. You just need to be more innovative, if you will, in how you're going to use it. So you're not just another protocol doing just another quest that's like same like 10 previous of your competitors, right?
Yeah.
And then the social media strategy is, we all know how important it is, but it's really important, right? Like this is where you build the trust. And for someone to use financial products, the trust needs to be built for you to do that. And so these acquisition methods are maybe not attributable in a way like that directly or within a specific time scale. So like your efforts are not as quantifiable as they are in, I don't know, maybe like just running a quest and seeing how much volume you've done, the number of participants. But if someone has a positive feedback loop with your project on a daily basis, you're posting often, people are responding and kind of replying to it and whatever, it creates an impression of this, oh, I know this project, like I know what they're doing, I trust them to connect my wallet and do a transaction through them. And that cannot be underappreciated. Like that is super important, even though it's not as quantifiable, for example, from an attribution perspective as these other channels are.
This is also brings me to a question that I wanted to ask about Superfest specifically. So correct me if I'm wrong or when I'm wrong, but essentially it's a initiative or a campaign that you've done with, is it Optimism?
Yes, so I can kind of explain what it was,
so
we can get into it. So it was an Optimism initiated campaign organized by Jumper and Conclave. Conclave is basically a DeFi orchestrator within the industry, and they help with this like DeFi side of things, which protocol. So they were the ones who were getting the applications of like protocols that want to participate. They were the ones who were deciding how many OP tokens in yield incentives each protocol is going to get based on their own parameters and stuff. And then Jumper took the rest, basically. We changed the UI, marketing for it, the verification mechanisms for the campaign, like mission pages and stuff like that. And so the end goal of the campaign was Optimism wants to separate itself from being a chain and wants to kind of move themselves into a hub, which they are, probably one of the best hubs you can build on from like easy deploy perspective. And so they wanted to focus on base mode fracs, and they wanted kind of the TVL inflow to the super chains. And Jumper was basically the enabler for that. And because we already are doing questing for 3 years, we have extensive knowledge in how to do it and how to target right. And then on top of that, we already had all of the bridges that Optimism wanted within the campaign supported within Jumper. So it was kind of this logical, credibly neutral choice because user can still choose any of these bridges. We even went a step further to kind of spur the competition between bridges, and we created specific bridge pages. So for example, you had like stargate.jumper.exchange, where when you went there, only Stargate bridge routes would show up, and we did the same for every other bridge that participated.
So here's where both the Superfest and the questing initiatives in general, there's obviously sort of a quid pro quo there, right? Sometimes it's, I don't know, a better sort of standing within the community. Sometimes it's a shout out. Sometimes it's expectation of financial gain, right? Some sort of yield or whatever. So, I mean, this is a question that obviously far exceeds marketing and is something that I think we've been talking in crypto for like 5+ years. But generally, from a marketing standpoint, how do you think about these users, especially users that are engaging with your campaigns specifically because of expectation of like future financial gain? Do you consider it as like pure mercenary capital? And do you think they can translate into valuable users? And to what extent are they useful for you guys moving forward?
There's, of course, a big part is mercenary, like PvP. Just, I want to click, I want dollars, I'll sell it, and I'll go away. But we have a lot of, about like, so out of 200, and we actually do numbers, out of 250,000 to 300,000 active wallets per month, about 65 to 70,000 of them is what I would call like a real user. So someone that's been with us for, more than 2 years, before Jumper days, they're doing their transactions on regular basis, and like their transactions don't look like farming in a way, right? Because so one of the things that we're looking at in general from a data perspective is what are users doing before in certain time period and after a certain time period after they use Jumper, right? And so these users, for example, when they bridge, they actually go do an action. They go buy an NFT, they deploy money in some pool, separate it around, and stuff like that. Second kind of data point that goes to show how a lot of users are not just purely farming, if you will. So for example, we have in these campaigns, you usually have to bridge the funds in, and then you have like, different tasks in different protocols. So in all of the campaigns, kind of the median number, about 20% of the money that's bridged for the campaign actually gets deployed in the tasks for the campaign. 80% of the money is used to explore the ecosystem. Now, if this would be purely mercenary P2P capital, and they would just do the tasks for the expectation of a future profit, then this percentage would lean more towards 100%, because they would just do this task for getting a reward or expectation of a future profit. But the difference is like it's vastly different. They actually go to the ecosystem, they fill the requirements to be eligible for the reward, but they continue kind of expanding into the ecosystem, and they go try different protocols that were maybe not listed, or just in general, while their money is there, why not kind of play with it, if you will. And so this is one of the strong selling points for the chains as well, because this is what you want to achieve. Like the campaigns that you organize through Jumper are your initial user acquisition method. But for you to survive as a chain and have sticky users and sticky TVL, you have to have an ecosystem for them to explore, right? Super simple perspective, you need to have the quote unquote OMS of the ecosystem, which is going to offer super high API or whatever, but then you need to have the ABEs as well, because if what I make on that chain, I can't deposit somewhere safely while I'm looking for the opportunities or waiting for the opportunities, I'll bridge out. I'm going back to my home chain and having my safety there, for example, right? And so there's both, of course, but like there's a lot of users that are actually like trying to participate in this from an educational perspective and actually trying to figure out what they can do in the ecosystem.
Another sort of acquisition channel that I think a lot of founders at least consider, from my own experience talking to a bunch of them through Data Los Angeles, is KOLs and engaging with, in KOL related campaigns. How do you guys think about KOLs in general? Is it a yes, a sometimes, a never? Does it depend on sort of how adjacent they are to your protocol, to your product? Where do you stand on cooperating with like influencers in crypto?
Yeah, I would start by first differentiating, because the KOL as a term is super wide. And so you have these like KOLs that the first ones that we think when we think KOL, right? This basically just like garbage, huge follower amount, like no knowledge and just like shilling stuff. And because they have a large community, they're able to kind of leverage that into something effective. But then like the question is like how good is that community, right? Like if you have not knowledgeable people that don't think for themselves, that don't actually like go figure out what the protocol does and just like look at a navigation from someone else, this is not your long-term target customer in the end as well. And I think there's a lot of negative brand affiliation if you start cooperating with KOLs like that. Now, there's other type of KOLs that I actually like a lot. So, for example, Subly. Subly is a profile. I've started like communicating with him when he was like 300 followers or something. Super active community member and active in a lot of different protocols. Currently, he's like 25, 30K. He's running the Optimist, which is basically the optimism focused media outlet or publication where he like showcases different super chain related protocols. He's optimism delegate as well, so like his community kind of delegates funds. Like that's a KOL I want to work with, right? This is a type of KOL that I would always support. And so one of the first questions that I think a lot of companies need to ask themselves, like, are you inheriting or gaining trust with the affiliations that you have, or are you losing it? And in a KOL space, most often they're not, you're losing it. And so it's kind of a very time-based commitment to figure out where you're going to gain it. Like it's not a thing where you're going to be like, oh, this week I'm going to go research KOLs and map them up and put them in the sheet type of thing, right? It's a very subtle thing to understand like who is actually trustworthy, who has built their community organically, who is not shilling, because like people like that, more often they're not going to work with you if your product sucks. Like that should be also a first sign in a vice versa relationship. So kind of to summary it, yes, it's a good thing to have people that are advocates, but the best way to have advocates is to create them, right? Give them a fertile ground in a way, give them visibility. So one of the things that we were thinking of doing on Jumper blog or Jumper Learn is having this like community section where there's going to be like a month, every month you can apply with your content. It can be whatever. It can be like explorations of ecosystems. It can be, airdrop threads, whatever. But if it's good enough, if it passes like the team check, it's going to get published. That means for you, you get the visibility. Of course, we get the free content. That's amazing, but you get the visibility. You're inheriting like 200,000 follower accounts. It's going to see what you wrote, and you can build on top of that. For example, on the DeFi side, what we've done, created this like data KOLs, if you will. So we basically started running every now and then these data competitions. So it was very kind of vague and wide. Look at our competitors, look at our users, look at XYZ. And we offered some like smaller monetary rewards for them to do so. And out of these, we have like 4 or 5 profiles that really did a good job. And now they're continuing to do so. And they're writing about DeFi and showcasing the data on a weekly basis. We retweet it, we support it from like our personal accounts, and like this is a KOL you want, right? And so I think the question again should be like, nothing in this industry cannot be you buy it, right? Like you're not in a bakery buying bread. Every angle you're building on, you need to build it. Like you need to know how you're building and why you're building it. And so going to like a KOL agency and saying, hey, I want to spend 100K on KOLs to get more brand awareness. This is Fugazi. Like this is, you're going to get talked about like 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, but then nothing will come out of it, because most of the people already have a bullshit radar, like a red flag going when a lot of these people are talking, and you're just basically making this again. Like a lot of people that you actually want don't even listen to KOLs. So you want these like organic, trustworthy, smaller accounts usually, because it's more effective to have 200 people that you've brought through a trustworthy channel that actually turn into your users and your advocates than having a reach of like 50,000, but it's people that will forget your name tomorrow morning after they participated in something that you've shoot out through the KOL, right?
Yeah, 100%. And also you mentioned something there that I also wanted to ask. You mentioned sort of maybe you get like 3 days of conversation around you on Twitter. That brings me to just general way that you guys measure success of campaigns and your marketing efforts? So this, I think there's two parts of this that I want to know. Number one, what do you do in terms of like trying to measure classic ROI? Do you look at Twitter analytics? Do you look at other sort of Web2? Do you use Web2 marketing analytics tools? And do you, on the other hand, and how much do you leverage Web3 marketing tools? There's a lot of sort of on-chain sleuthing types of analytics, but specifically for marketing. Do you guys look at, I don't know, the amount of volume processed through Jumper as one of the ROIs? Are you able to connect that to your marketing efforts? Obviously, very often marketing efforts can be intangibles and you can't really ideally make the connection throughout the sort of pipeline of a user journey. But to the best of your abilities, what do you do to measure your marketing ROI?
Yeah, I can start with, so of course you want to, at least early on, you want to measure everything, and data is the key, and data is the whatever. Data is good to track, but it shouldn't be like a lifeline in a way, especially in Web3, where VPN usage, for example, is extremely high. So like the geolocations of users don't really matter that much. You can't look at the geolocation through someone that connected their wallet, for example, especially if they use a VPN. So like a lot of these data points that people use in traditional or Web2 companies, if you will, are kind of obfuscated and not really giving you the full picture. We have kind of embarked on a journey to have this marketing data dashboard and model, if you will. But like I think midpoint of 2022, I've spent about 9 months and probably talked about 17 different projects and actually started doing things and started working on the dashboards. But the problem was because of the nature of our protocol, like live or 20 plus chains and stuff like that, more often than not, we would just like have incomplete data because everything that we do cannot, like there was no protocol that kind of had all the chains supported and stuff like that. So what we've done, we basically hired internal data team, and all of this is now being built by us internally. So we look at a lot of data, but it's per need. Hey, I'm missing this. I'm missing this for the narrative. I'm missing this for the pitch deck. I'm missing this. Like this, I can't understand why this behavior happened or why the drop in volume happened. So like, let's look into this. And so out of these, you basically come up with more actionable insights, if you will. Because like one of the things that we noticed as well, even if we remove the limitations of like not supporting all of the chains, one of the things that annoyed me super early on was that a lot of these like, call it attribution data protocols, whatever, they show you the data, but this data is like for us to sift through, right? It's on me and my team to spend, weeks or whatever to kind of go through it. And nothing was like that actionable. Nothing was like giving me insights in a way. So like I would expect if I pay you as a company to like do data for me, like I want you to also serve me that data in an actionable form, like something that I don't have to spend, or my team doesn't have to spend a lot of time like going raw into it and figuring it out ourselves. Now for our metrics, we stopped with the social media metrics maybe 9 months ago, a year ago. It was kind of this maybe like even subtle psychological barrier when we crossed the 100K. I just started thinking like, it doesn't matter anymore. Like for the type of user or person on the other side looking at the profile, and like they don't have the understanding of how easy it is to like fake the followers or whatever. Having 100 like 6-figure up number, this is like a signal enough, right? Like it's something we can't stop focusing on and start focusing on engagement. So social media metric for me is engagement. Like out of the views, how many people actually interacted with this, how many shared it, and like this is the metric that we kind of abide by because that is your goal, right? Like the worst thing you can have is a 300,000 follower account with 11 likes on your post. Like that's the strongest signal you can have not to touch the protocol, basically. And then from the campaign perspective, it's volume, and that's kind of especially for us, like within our system, it's easy to track. And because we've done so many campaigns, we now have a way of kind of mapping it of the like success benchmarks in a way, how successful it was in comparison to the other ones. And another one is how much TVL we managed to bring for every $1 of reward. So for example, our lower to upper ratio benchmark, if you will, before Superfest was the least successful campaigns brought about $36, $37 per $1 of reward. The most successful ones did 130, 135. Superfest did 200 for each dollar of reward of a new TVL brought to the chain. And so it's not as easy to like tie all of these, like a user clicked this on Twitter and then came and connected the wallet and did a transaction. Well, like that is not easy to map. We cohort a lot. And so you can cohort specific results based on like timestamps when something happened, when an announcement happened, or when some major push happened that we saw had like a little bit of influence. And so we can start mapping time-wise. And then these things that you cannot really directly connect through like, Web2 methods of like, oh, Google Analytics knows everything and every click you did. You can start kind of cohorting these together and looking at like, okay, like this campaign started, we said this, and then we got an influx of users that much. We got like this much volume, or we did a tweet, and we got new entrants in the campaign after that tweet, for example. So like things like this you can track.
I wanted to ask you about, let's say you're just starting out and you just got hired as a marketer, or you're a founder and you just don't know your market that well from a marketing perspective, and you're building a bridge just to make it easy for you. How much do you look at what your competition is doing to try to replicate successful campaigns versus how much are you just like, I have a vision in mind, I'm going to maybe even abandon conventional wisdom, what's worked so far, I want to do it my own way? Like, how much do you actually rely on competitive marketing analysis when you're starting out? Because obviously you should do it to a point, but at the same time, you do at the end of the day want to sort of stand out from the crowd. And if you're doing the same thing that everybody else in your niche is doing, you're probably going to sort of fall in with the noise, right? So you want to make it some sort of a balance.
Yes, it's also what are you trying to achieve with it? So yes, very much the competitive analysis from an on-chain and off-chain perspective. But the question is like, what do you use it for, right? Like, for example, for me, the question is like, just a practical example. We just started supporting Solana. Okay, so who are the largest players in Solana? It's Radium, it's Jupiter. Okay, so what, like figuring out what is the relationship of the community with these protocols, like how hard it will be for us to break this barrier. So for example, Jupiter, super hard to break, like Jupiter, they're in the bear market, and it's kind of a love child, if you will, from the Solana community. And so you're looking at these overlaps and how you can acquire users from Jupiter. So you need competitive analysis to even understand like who your competitor is and how they're interacting with their community, but not to a point where like you copy, because like everything you copy is a law of diminishing returns, right? Anything that's new is going to be popping. And like this is something that I think Jumper was really good at. A lot of the like this intern style and the videos and like the memes and stuff like that, like even now it happens with large protocols. Some even have a lot more followers than Jumper. Blatant copy, right? And then when you see engagement on Jumper, when you see engagement on their posts, you're like, well, they just copy it. Like, I don't care, right? And so it's your job to be like one step ahead. So again, practical example, we did a lot of like social media tasks within our campaigns. And follow Discord, like especially for us, it wasn't that important, but for partner protocols, it was. They wanted to grow their presence, they wanted to grow their Discord. And then we started noticing that there's like a couple of people started complaining about it. And so it was a conversation like, well, is this really needed for the campaign? Like, if we remove it, what happens? So we removed it, and people actually liked it a bit more. There was like less clicks they had to do. And like, even from a perspective of me as a user, I have a burner account for stuff like that. Like when I'm participating in like a Galaxy Quest or whatever. And so you just start thinking, well, okay, that's not really important, right? And so we removed it super early on. Again, without looking at what competitors are doing, we wouldn't be able to make that decision, but it didn't inform us to copy anything. It just informed our knowledge in a way so we can structure it differently. So you should be looking what the competition is doing. But like if the approach is to copy it, you're done. It's never going to be as effective as being original. And to your previous point, if you're new and just you don't understand the market or whatever, you cannot be at a point where like, I'm going to do things my own way, right? The first pathway has to be to understand, okay, where are we? Right? Like for my actions, where are we? What are we doing right now? Who are the top 5 protocols that are doing this channel, avenue, whatever? Okay, what can I learn from that? Let me go 3 months back. What did they do back then? What was the change? Like all of these things require time for you to understand, because if you want to elevate or innovate in something, you need to understand it really well to be able to do so. Otherwise, you're basically a blind goose. And like this is, I guess, this can be connected to everything we talked about. Your opinion, like this is something I struggled early on as well. Like, oh, I don't use it, so we don't do that. So like this, like me personally should like inform a little bit, but you also need to look what others are doing and like talk to the community and start figuring this out, but kind of bit by bit. I will say though, like it's a lot more difficult to be innovative, but if you crack that code, it's also a showcase of you as a protocol. Because like one of the beauties of this industry is you can screw up, you can make mistakes, but this appearance of shipping, of being innovative, of constantly evaluating and bringing new things, this is what your community that you're building actually values the most, right? Because this is actually the most relatable part. It's not just like, oh, ivory tower, perfect protocol, does everything great and whatever. So like these things, these iterations should be done in public, should be communicated. And this is also part of this, like you can call it founder-led marketing. Other people can also do it. Like Jordan from our team, he's a community lead and he basically owns that role on socials as well. And so when people think of Jumper, they think of him as well, especially from this like the deep community perspective. So talk about these changes, talk about the iteration, talk about the thought process. Okay, like we're removing socials because we saw this. We're adding this because we've noticed that this might be better from a UX perspective. But like having this thought process outlined, transparent, out in a way, that's where you become relatable, basically. Like it's a human behind it. Humans make decisions based on their discussions. And in Web3, because we already have this cohesive relationship with the community, these discussions should also be public, right? You might not want to have like a community call where the community decides on things, but at least give them your thought process of why you've done something. I think one of the best examples of that is Meow from Jupiter, like leading to their token launch. And if you remember, like, novel 1 I've read, novel 2 I read half, and then additional 36 novels that he published on like the reasoning and thought process I didn't read, but I was like, wow, I love this. Like this is going to be an amazing launch. And I got, airdrops on a couple of wallets, and then I bought more because like he made me feel like, oh, like even if they fail, there's so much, like they're not doing it easily, right? Like there's so much that went into it. They're like planning and thought process and effort and changing things and figuring things out, and it's admirable. And so if something's admirable to me, it was a much easier decision for me to actually buy the token and participate. I'm still a bag holder, basically, right?
So I got one final actual question for you. Obviously, you talk to users, right? But you talk to them on Discord, on Twitter. These conversations are great, but they can be superfluous and not necessarily super useful for your marketing efforts. So do you guys do, or have you done in the past, sort of customer interviews, conversations, specifically with the idea or a goal of understanding who your users are and building a user persona? Or if you didn't, how did you go about creating that initial user persona? Because right now it seems like you're very aware of who your users are, but that probably you didn't start from that point. It took some sort of a learning curve.
Yeah, it's still a learning curve, to be honest. And we actually do a lot of these types of engagements. So for example, depending on their on-chain behavior, we would ping the users and just have a conversation with them. When we notice there's a little large transfer and we can kind of map out if it was a fund or something, we try to reach out and basically just like our first goal is open up a line of conversation, right? Having the users that we want be able to just any of us from the team or whatever in like a DM, and just like have the relationship being built out. And more often than not, what happens is through the conversation, let's say like, you're a user that I want to talk to or whatever, and we're going to have a 30-minute conversation. I'm going to have some questions prepared or whatever. The insights are not going to be as important more often than not. What is important though, 3 weeks from now, you're going to use Jumper and you're going to have an issue. Or you're going to have a thought, hey, like, this is stupid. Like, why did they implement this? You're going to ping me. You're going to be, hey, I just connected with my safe wallet and XYZ didn't work. Can you check what's with that? Like stuff like that. And so on a long time scale, when you do that, you basically get a lot of input just when you're not asking for it, right? And so this conversation, the initial one, helps us kind of map you out, from a user persona perspective. But then the actual help from you comes down the line because we gave you an open line of communication that you can basically get in touch with the team, and you know that your feedback is going to be heard. That's also the other thing as well. What we like a year and a half ago, we did a lot of these like feedback surveys, right? And you can see in a lot of UIs, you have like you can even like leave a feedback, and if they already have like Web3 protocols for it that's connected to some type of reward that you're completely missed, because you're in like you get what you incentivize for in a way. So if you incentivize for this type of behavior, you're going to get a lot of inputs. All of them are going to be bad. We did that a couple of times because we were also figuring out what is the most optimal way to do so. None of it was actually relevant. It was a lot of like copy pastas and a lot of these like super, I've looked at a UI for 2 seconds and what's the first thing I can think of basically to do it. But like developing the relationship with these crucial actors within your protocol is much more worthwhile. And I would advise everyone to do it, because this is where you get the nuggets. This is where you get the gold, if you will.
Marko, thanks a lot for your time. And I think a very insightful and a valuable conversation for founders. Any last notes before we go? I guess check out Jumper. Anything else that we should know?
Check out Jumper. We have Say rewards coming. This is actually, maybe you can cut it or not, but I kind of forgot to mention it during the early question of like, mercenary PvP or whatever, the effectiveness of these campaigns. So the API on one of the pools in the protocol that's within the Say campaign was 79% for ETH, basically. And so we had one whale that basically ate up the pool. He filled the cap for the pool, and he's currently making 40% API on his ETH, right? And so like there are people that really know how to play this game. Yeah. And one of the things as well for users is, I think as you grow as a user, capital wise, you remove yourself from 1000x's and you start thinking in percentages. And like these campaigns are actually pretty decent in percentage terms. It's just different when you have $100 portfolio and you grow it to like 109 versus having, $10 million portfolio and just made $1 million in 2 weeks by doing something.
Sounds good. Guys, check out Jumper. Thanks again, Marko, for the conversation. And
thank you for having me.